Can you do a British accent?
On today's episode
of No Limits Real Estate, it's just lovely what's going on. We're going to have just such a fabulous time. I don't know,
With the people.
Kind of close. Hey guys, on today's episode of No Limits Real Estate, it's me and Leah. We're going to have some fun talking about changes in real estate, right? That's our topic today.
Yeah.
Did you read the script?
I mean, I read it, but I thought she was going to have it open for us a little bit.
Can we read it somewhere?
Yeah.
This would be helpful.
Like
and just to let you know, it's not like script like we're going to read everything off the script. It's just we were told professionally.
My name is Craig.
How are you today?
Hey guys, on today's episode of No Limits Real Estate, Leah and I are going to discuss actually a topic that has been around for a while but has lessened in headlines recently. So I want to talk a little bit about the NAR lawsuit and kind of like its implications in the industry, because this is something we're going to have to touch on over and over again, because the implications are going to take, it's going to be a period of time before it actually resonates in boots on the ground what's going on in real estate. And I think it's interesting that the headlines have softened about the conversation because it was all sensationalized.
Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden you had all these reports coming out like commissions haven't moved, nothing's happened. Right. And then it's like, now it's dead silent. Right. So go ahead.
I mean, do you think it's dead silent because it was scary to begin with, and now as people are getting entrenched in it, they are understanding what's happening? Or do you think it's silent because they don't understand what's happening?
I think it's silent because it was sensationalized, exciting. People have changes they see come to the industry and they think, hey, it's going to happen overnight. It's going to be huge. It's going to be catastrophic. And then if it's not, then it loses sensationalism.
True.
And it doesn't demand readers anymore. It doesn't demand clicks anymore. So all of a sudden they're on to the next thing like CCP, or they're on to the next thing, right? So as these things settle, what happens is I feel like, and I'd love to hear your input on it,
Sure.
but I feel like it loses its excitement.
Yeah.
So people stop talking about it and they talk about the next exciting thing, but then the lasting effects start taking effect, right? Like the changes start coming into place and they start making changes on the ground, right?
Yep. I mean, as a agent in the field, I think I have this conversation more often than not, just because the change is always something that's forefront in a seller's mind. When they say, hey, I want to list my house, they're like, oh, hey, I heard this. Can you explain this to me?
Yep.
And I think that is something that always stays in the forefront of my mind. And then on the buyer side, we have the conversation of, hey, this is what I'm going to put into my offer. This is how the commission is structured. This is how the offer is structured. And so I think from an agent's point of view, I'm constantly seeing it evolve in some form or fashion. I had an agent that asked me recently, well, you have the form for buyer's broker compensation in your offer and you have closing costs in your offer. Why do you have both of those in your offer? I'm like, because they're two separate things.
That's perfect. And that's exactly what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the national perspective and we're talking about boots on the ground, what's actually happening. So let's get into it.
Let's break this down. Let's talk on a national level first. So obviously you're entrenched in the national conferences, you're going places, you're talking about the lawsuit. Break it down from a national level. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Why are you laughing?
I'm going places.
You are
I like that statement. All right. So what's the question about national? Like what would you like to understand about the perspective of the national lawsuit? That's been all over the headlines. It's been in every publication. It's been at every conference. It's been literally the subject of every conference for the past 2 years, legitimately.
So break it down from a lawsuit perspective. Like talk about high level lawsuit, and then break it down from the settlement and how the settlement happened.
So, I mean, we'll go really, really high level so that because I don't want to get into like the weeds of all this because we could go hours and hours. And some people have done some amazing breakdowns on really the lawsuit. So if you want to hear the nuances of the lawsuit and the details, there's some great breakdowns on it. But the Sister Burnett lawsuit evolved, went all the way to court, and they did find a verdict that they were guilty as far as NAR and all the plaintiffs were guilty as far as what happened. And at the end of the day, they lost the lawsuit. So it was found through what was a per se antitrust lawsuit that there were some practices in the industry that were unlawful or that were harming to the consumer. So the way to look at it is like some practices were set up in the industry that they found as harmful to the consumer. I'll say everybody in the industry would say that they don't believe that,
Right.
and they feel like it was a misrepresentation of the industry by far. And I would agree with a lot of those points in there. A lot of the points are 100% misrepresentations of how things are done.
Sure.
But in a per se antitrust lawsuit, the one thing you have to understand is really what they were looking for is, do the components exist that someone could harm a consumer by using these pieces that are in place? Doesn't mean that they're doing it, but do they exist? Does that make sense?
And the answer was yes.
And the answer is yes.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a lot of people knew that kind of this is where the lawsuit was going to go. It was going to be found. They were going to be found guilty. The verdict was going to go against them because it's kind of like the idea, and it's been likened to like a bicycle. If parts of a bicycle are sitting on the ground, is it a bike? No, it's not really a bike. But if you put the wheels on, you put the pedals on, you put the chain on, you put the handlebars on, could it be used as a bike? Yes, it could, right? Because the parts exist. So in the solution for that, the settlement, they came up with the settlement that pieces of the bike would be replaced. It would be removed, right? So it couldn't be that was the thought process, right? So think of things like the concept of the MLSs are no longer able to have co-op commission displayed in the MLSs, right? So NAR-owned MLSs are not allowed to have that co-op commission displayed in their listing inventory anymore, right? Or in any data that they have. As a matter of fact,
anywhere.
You can't even take MLS data and add that information to it except for on a broker's website, right? So that was taking a piece apart, right? And the concept was, the idea was, is the listing agent pre-negotiating commissions for a buyer's agent, right, to steer the buyer's agent to their property, right? That's the premise on it. And like I said, there's a million different really, really good breakdowns on everything about the lawsuit and the nuances and things like that. But on the national stage, that's really what happened. And unfortunately, how it landed was everybody had to, at some stage, join into this settlement. So NAR's $418 million covered everybody like $2 billion and below in volume, and then they left they exposed top brokerage companies that need to go and settle themselves. So you had large franchisors like Anywhere, and you had large brokerage companies, national brokerage companies that ended up setting up their own settlements and settling. And you're sitting here now as you've got a lot of people have paid a lot of money out, right, and have agreed to no longer use these certain practices.
Well, they've agreed to change.
Yeah, they've
agreed.
Change how they represent consumers, how they, hey, before we actually show a property, we'll have a buyer brokerage agreement signed.
Sure.
Right, things like that. And now nationally on the stage, you're seeing a lot of people kind of push back on it. Right, so you're seeing I think it's Alabama Association of Realtors is pushing back, saying they're not going to get them signed. Right, Zillow came out with a different, a viewing form instead of a traditional BBA. Right, so you see a lot of that going on, trying to figure out where does this land.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that my question is more the national piece that I have to talk about is not the one that warrants conversation in this dialogue. I think that really what warrants the conversation is how has this implemented, or what are the implications on the ground level? More along the lines of what you're doing, right? Working with clients in the field, and our agents are out there working with clients, and how has that changed and how has it evolved? Some agents were saying, hey, if you want to know what the co-op is offered, call me on each individual listing, right? How efficient does that become? Right? Some agents just don't do that. They say, hey, just write in the offer.
Right.
Some sellers are wanting to pay that money and they understand, and some sellers aren't. And some sellers are saying, no, it's part of the negotiations of the deal now.
I think it's imperative to understand that this conversation has always been a negotiable topic, right? So commission has always been negotiable. It was just not always stated that way.
So I'm gonna this is a good debate, because I want to debate with you on this 1,000%, because I disagree with you on that. It is legally it has been negotiable, but visibly it has not.
I agree.
Okay, so when a buyer writes an offer in their net, there's not a buyer fee. There's not a buyer broker commission saying, hey, this is how I get paid. Matter of fact, back in years ago, there were a lot of debates, and agents would display that, hey, if you work with me as a buyer's agent, it's free. which was not
false.
true.
Yeah.
Right? And then NAR came out with a rule that you can't say that it's free anymore.
Right.
I think it was in 2016 or 18, somewhere in there.
Right.
They came out with a policy that you can't say that it's free, right? So like that's where a lot of this stems from, right?
Sure.
So like so if it now becomes a conversation with the buyer saying, hey, my ability to buy the house could be impacted by this fee, this bill, right? It could make my offer less attractive.
Sure.
Right? If one agent comes in and says, or one buyer comes in and says, I don't have this compensation that has to be woven into the net, and the other one says, I do, is their offer worth less, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which it validly is,
Sure.
right, to the seller. So, anyways, I think now it's more on the forefront, right?
Yeah, and I think it actually makes you stronger, right? So like as you're working through an offer, you have several pieces of negotiation that are tangible than you did before. And when I'm talking to a seller and as a listing agent, I'll sit and I'll say, okay, this is the only fee we negotiate up front. And when we negotiate this up front, you have to understand when we get an offer, there are several other pieces that can still be negotiated. And that's important to the bottom dollar, right? It's the same thing on the buy side. When I'm negotiating an offer for a client, if I see closing cost is super important to them, I'll say, hey, you know what? Let's go down on my commission side, and then let's go ahead and up your closing cost because I know how important that is to you, and then let's submit the offer this way. Or vice versa. I'll talk to the listing agent. Listing agent will say, well, we're paying a 3%, 3% co-op. It's not technically a co-op, but the seller's paying 3% to the buyer's agent, but they won't pay the closing cost. Okay, well, how much can I reduce this or offset by price or offset by my commission to get this offer across the table? So what it does is it's an empowerment tool in my mind. As a buyer's agent or as a listing agent, it's a way to empower you to say, hey, let me work for you. Let me work on your behalf. That's our job anyway. So I mean, I think that it's huge. I mean, it makes total sense, and I think in my mind, I know that there's a lot of back and forth on this, but I think it's a good thing. I mean, I've seen great impacts from it.
So there's headlines out there right now that are, it was false. It made no changes. As a matter of fact, there's an entire podcast out there with.
I saw that. Did
you see the one? But that was Anyways, we won't quote that one. No, there was a couple podcasts that literally like very misinformed people that were 100% talking about lawsuits, the impacts of the lawsuits, and saying there was no change, and that this whole lawsuit was to make all this change, and it was supposed to lower commissions for the consumer. So there's this whole narrative out there that the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit was to protect the consumer, and it was going to lower commissions to the consumer to make houses more affordable. Okay. So there's a whole narrative out there about
such
that.
a false narrative, though.
It's a very, very, very false narrative. But I do want to touch on the fact is like commissions, if you look at them, have actually ticked up a little bit, right? And it hasn't, done anything to the prices of the houses, right? The price of the house is not going to be affected by it. We know that, but a lot of people out there don't understand how that flows or how that works. And so I think, and I want to hear your opinion on it, because everything you just articulated was well articulated and outlined for a agent that's been in the industry for a while.
Sure. That
knows how to negotiate with their customer, that knows how to articulate their value, that knows how to speak to, hey, this is my role in the transaction, this is the value I bring in the transaction, which is much more than what the commissions is, things like that.
Sure.
But a middle of the road or new licensee, like that's more difficult to do. So has it taken the transaction up a notch? Right, like there's a lot of reports that the percentage of agents that actually did transactions in the past 24 months is very low. It's a very low percentage, right? And so is it that deals are gravitating towards more professional agents? Is that happening?
I mean, I think that depends. I think, in a sense, yes, but I think it's important to understand that. I mean, as a newer agent, you can still articulate your value. The problem is...
I agree with that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, are these deals gravitating towards more professional agents that are more seasoned, that can articulate their value better?
Yes, sure. I mean, I would agree with that. I would also venture to say that a lot of people who get into the industry think that it's an easy industry to be in and that you're instantly going to make money. And I think that is that is an extremely false pretense for real estate. And I think that's where the issue is.
So you get in real estate, and let's say that real estate is realistically, it takes let's just ballpark it, 6 months to get into production.
Yeah.
Your new licensee, you get in the business, you're putting
Yeah.
your reps in, it takes 6 months to get into production to close a deal.
Yeah.
Okay, now that's in a world that you're typically your first couple transactions are buy side transactions.
Yeah.
And typically those deals you're not negotiating your commission, right? It was already pre-bolted in, right? So is there a reality now that what is actually happening is that same individual, instead of being 6 months, is now 12 months,
Easily.
right?
Easily.
Puppy would agree.
I agree.
Yeah.
He said, "Heck yeah."
So
Yeah. I mean, 12 months or a year and a half.
okay.
I mean, because what you're doing is you're
So
realizing.
the industry was already hard.
It was already hard, and it
And
just
it's
got
harder.
harder.
So does that make this a more of a professional industry category? Like, is this going to be more filled with just professionals in the industry, like a smaller number of people? NAR's already quoting roughly that there's, instead of 1.5, there's going to be 1.2 million realtors.
This is a
In
professional service industry,
Mhm.
and that is exactly what it is. Your professional services are what you get paid for, and so I think yes, this is a professionals industry. So if you got into it thinking, oh, I'm going to make quick money or I'm going to do this as a side gig, it's going to be hard. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. My advice to a new agent would be to use your listening skills, right?
Okay.
Learn from the consumer what it is that's important to them, and stop using the "I'm new" as a strategy to get through a transaction. I mean, it's very simple to listen to somebody and then articulate your value based off of what they're saying.
Someone use that as a strategy? I'm new.
It happens all the time.
Wow.
I hear it all the time.
Wow. With new agents coming into the business, so what is the mindset that you instill in them, like working with them on preparing them on how to address those concerns, right? Because if the reflex is I'm a new agent, right? How do you instill and work with them to approach these situations with confidence and with understanding? Right?
So I think it's just that. It's confidence. It's about instilling confidence in who they are before they ever start a transaction, right? So with our agents, I have conversations around, okay, if you have a stumbling block of negotiation, let's talk about it. Let's work it out. Let's talk through it. And then let's show confidence in how you respond. Because it's very easy to back down when you're in a negotiation standpoint and you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But when you show that you're confident in who you are and what you have to offer, which is the person that you are, you can articulate how you walk through that transaction or how you articulate that negotiating skill.
Mm-hmm. That's good. And then what kind of feedback are you getting from agents, like new licensees or newer to the business agents, lower volume agents that are trying to increase their volume, like as far as, the impacts from this, like the changes? We've got some agents that have been in the business for a little while, right? That were prior to the settlement and post-settlement. So, like, what are those differences they're dealing with?
I mean, I think we're seeing some of the commissions be 2.5%, which is fine. I mean, it's totally fine. It just depends on how you want to approach the situation. I think what you're seeing that listing agents with a newer buyer's agent are able to come back and say, no, this is all we're offering. And so it's harder for them to negotiate or articulate their value when they feel like that's all they're offering. So I'm seeing some of that, but you're easily able to say, hey, let's increase the offer to X to offset the commission standpoint of this, and let's push forward with the offer. It's very simple to negotiate. It's just a matter of having the conversation. If you could talk to an agent now versus, when you had your previous brokerage, what would the differences be from then and now as far as articulating value or walking through a negotiation conversation?
With a customer, so
Yeah, from a newer buyer's agent, how would you tell them to articulate value?
pre versus post lawsuit.
Yeah.
I would tell you, I really am a believer that where the industry is heading, the residential real estate industry is heading, and not everybody's a believer in this, but it's fine, is I believe it's going to look more like commercial in the future.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because I can see agents that as they get into the business, they're going to be doing a lot of activities that are licensing activities that are not necessarily writing a contract. But the reason for that is because it does build confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence in understanding inventory, confidence in understanding product, confidence in walking through hundreds of homes and showing them and touring them and doing open houses and interacting with clients, not on the high pressure situation where you're trying to get them to sign a $500,000 offer, right? But actually to where you're helping them educate them about the houses and walk them through different things. Because what happens is when you do that, I would tell any agent right now, like sitting in the office isn't where you get value. Going out in the field is where you get value.
Sure.
And I'd say that like at Local Realty, we have an amazing community of agents, and they feed into each other and they grow each other, and that I absolutely love. But on top of that is like in those open gaps of time, if you're not working with a client, you should be out touring houses, even if you're doing it on your own.
We're doing an
Because
open house.
there's things that happen with like fidgeting with the lockbox and problems getting in the house, or there's a cat that shoots out the front door, and you learn how to deal with those situations. But you also see product and you gain confidence. Like, oh, this one's got a jacuzzi, or this one's got, this is how the back porch is, or this is how the HOA amenities are set up. So all those things instill confidence. So I think knowing your product, knowing your industry, and then like there's nothing better than sitting in an open house. Like you sit in an open house, you get to interact with people coming in, asking questions about the house. Like that's getting those reps in and getting those conversations in to talk and have the dialogue about real estate. And that's really what grows confidence. And I agree with you 100%. It's like that confidence is what actually instills in you, hey, I bring value to this transaction, right? This is how I can help you understand the value that I bring. I can articulate it to you. I can help you write an offer. I can help you do these things that need to happen. So, that's the way that I really believe the industry, the real estate residential industry is going to go, is towards segmented, more like commercial is, to where you have lots of roles.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, hey, get in the business and go do a deal. It's going to be get in the business, and there's all these reps you can put in to learn about the industry, learn about working with customers, building that confidence.
My advice to any agent would be to get yourself entrenched in the industry, no matter what level you're in, right? New experience, get yourself entrenched in the industry, but also always have confidence in who you are and be true to yourself. And this is a relationship industry. We are supposed to be building relationships. So being
100%.
out in the field is how you build a relationship.
Yeah, 100%. With everything that's happened, there's going to be lasting effects.
Sure.
It's not done yet, right? Like there's going to be continual effects that will spiral, right? There's a ripple effect that's going on right now, right? This event happened. There's ripples that are coming from it, right? We haven't seen all the effects yet of the ripples. So, what do you think is coming as far as at the local level, at the agent level, customer relationship component? What else do you see coming down? Because we're watching things like how the commissions are discussed or articulated or changing, right? Like out of the gate, there were some agents that said, "Hey, I'll post my percentage in a voicemail, or you can call me one-on-one." More and more gravitating towards, "Hey, just write it in the offer."
Yep.
Right? Do you believe that we're going to eventually be where just everything's going to be right in the offer?
Yes.
Right? It seems like that's where it's going. Right? What else do you see as a ripple effect?
I
off of this?
I see the industry shortening, right? I see agents getting out of the business.
So, volume of agents decreasing.
Decreasing.
Okay.
Yeah. I see co-ops going away completely in a listing agreement.
Yep.
I can see that already. I can see it from a GAR form standpoint, kind of walking
So
away.
broker share.
Yep. And I can see the conversations lessening as well from a, hey, what are you offering? Or are you offering buyer brokerage commission? I mean, I'm already seeing that compensation conversation kind of dwindle and everything being written into an offer. So I'm seeing some of that. I think we're going to see a lot more of buyers being trying to articulate or understand, hey, what's the difference between my closing cost and your compensation? And I think that is a question that doesn't get answered well enough. And I think there's going to be a lot more of that type of conversation happening so that they understand, okay, what am I actually responsible for if the seller chooses not to pay you? And I think that's a big question. But again, price points, a lot of the comparables that you pull for listings, they have been paying commission and compensation. And so that is a real conversation that you're having with sellers is, hey, we're comparing your home to this home over here, and they paid XYZ in compensation, and so you have to understand price point was built for this. So I think that is
Essentially, wasn't it always to an extent?
yes.
I mean, it was always like every
But now
house.
you're having to explain it,
Yeah,
which is fine,
I understand.
but you have to explain that to them because they don't understand that.
That's good.
So that's what I think is happening from a local level or moving forward. I'm seeing some of those things unfold. From a high level,
Are they positive or negative?
positive. All of it's positive.
I like that.
The more that you can engage with your customer, the more that you can get into the weeds and help them to understand what they're doing, the deeper the relationship becomes.
100%.
It's all about growing a relationship. I think there's somebody who is a huge coach, says your relationship starts at the closing table, it doesn't end. It's very valuable.
Very cool.
So what about from a national level? What are you seeing move forward? What do you think is going to happen moving forward? What do you see the trajectory of this lawsuit being?
The implications at the national level are it's just getting started. And I'm not saying that to like cause fear or anything by any means. Don't be an alarmist. It's a good thing though, because it is, there's a lot of industries looking at real estate and looking at the different facets of real estate and saying how can it be refined. And every industry is refined one of two ways, externally or internally. Either internally you decide, hey, we need to refine it, we need to make it better, or externally you get pressures that say, hey, you need to create regulation, you need to do these things different, we need to understand why you're doing these things. And that's where we're at right now, is we have a lot of industries that are pushing in on real estate saying, hey, we need to understand why you're doing these things, we need to change some of these things. So there's lots of other lawsuits that are out there right now that are stemming around the idea of broker share.
Yeah.
Right? I think broker share will go away. I think it's going to 100% go away. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's going to go away. I think we're going to have a lot more documentation, and we're going to have a lot more transparency with the consumer as far as forms and understanding, like what are they signing on, where does the money come from, right? Like all those different facets are going to become very, very transparent. And we have other industries like leaning into real estate. Like if you look at Rocket bought Redfin, and that was Rocket, a mortgage company, leaning into buying a brokerage company. And that's a heavily regulated industry, the mortgage industry, pushing into a much less regulated real estate industry. So I think you'll see a lot of that happen. But the one thing that I think that will be a little shocking to everybody is I think we're going to see more national and federal controls around real estate. It's always been very local. It's been very state level. So we'll see a lot of that happen. But look, years ago we didn't have brokerage companies like EXP and Compass and things like that were just national brokerage companies built overnight by having licensees or brokerage in every state and setting up those firms. So, it's a different, how the industry is structured right now is a little bit different. I was at the American Bar Association and spoke, and it was a lot about they wanted to understand how does the commission actually flow in the contracts? How are contracts actually signed? And a lot of that is stemming to the idea of are there more points of, are other things going to be regulated? How does it actually work? And actually their conversation was more of an exploratory conversation because they really did want to understand we think we're way off on this. How do we understand what pieces are we missing that doesn't make sense to us? So I think there's going to be a lot of more regulation. Okay. I think there's going to be a lot more changes that will come down the pipe. But the great thing is we're an amazing industry that has this resilient way of changing and ebbing and flowing and finding a way. This is the most entrepreneurial industry that I've ever worked in, but it's a very entrepreneurial industry. It's great because I think from brokers to agents to team members to assistants, everything, everybody in this category, we find ways to make things happen, and it stems from helping our consumer get that home that they desire, they love, and they want to build a life in, and they're passionate about, and they're emotional about, and they want to have their kid in that school system. So we rise up to that occasion. And I think that this industry will always rise to the occasion. That's what's super cool about it, is we have amazing people across this industry that will find a way. Yep. And we will.
The other piece is that we see the real estate industry change all the time, right? There's peaks and then there's valleys. And the truth is that we have to ride that wave, and we have to learn to adapt. And that is our job, is to adapt and to continue moving forward. And I loved what you said. You said, this industry is a cool entrepreneur. I think you said the best entrepreneurial industry. And what I love about that is that you can choose who you want or what level you want to be at in real estate. And that is something different than a lot of different industries. And so if you want to be at this level, you can be at this level. If you just want to be right here, you can be right here. If it's a part-time gig, you can do that. Again, I think I mentioned that earlier. It's a little harder to do that now, but it's just something to keep in mind. You can choose your level, and this is an industry where you can choose what level you want to be at, and it's a life-changing industry is what it is.
It is. That's what I've always loved about this industry, is it is a life-changing industry. It's made by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. Yep. And I mean that, you have, there's nothing better, and I get asked all the time, it's why do you get out of production and get into leading companies? It's because there's nothing more fun than helping other people experience that life change. Like when someone goes from making $35,000 a year to making 75 to making 120 to making 250 to making $500,000, whatever it is, like whatever is that life change moment for them, it's really cool. Like I've had more conversations with agents that come in and they're like, man, I came in here, I was making 35, now I'm making 75, and it's just amazing.
Yeah,
Like I didn't have to question buying a car. I got to book the vacation that I wanted, or like we got to put our kids in the school system we wanted to have them in, or private school network, or whatever it was. Like that is super, super cool for people to experience that.
Yeah.
Right. And that is what real estate really enables for a lot of people, that for them to thrive in that entrepreneurial, growth opportunity. And it's not comfortable. Like we always say that, growth and comfort can't coexist. They just don't. But you go through waves of being uncomfortable to grow, to experience that life change, and it's super cool about this industry. Like that is the number one thing that I absolutely am passionate about in this industry is helping others find life change.
Yeah.
Right.
We opened this podcast with the question, what's changing, with the NAR lawsuit, and I think that what we can say pretty much together is that it's changing, but it's changing for the better, because real estate is something that is an ebb and flow of change.
Mm-hmm.
And while it is uncomfortable, sometimes it is changing for the better, in my mind. Clock it.
Clock it.
Perfect.
Still
Y'all
lame,
did good.
sorry.
No, y'all did it good. Yeah, that was really good.